Welcome and be inspired with Dominic. And this week, great things have been set in motion. Grandiose things. Things I can't wait to tell you about, but I wasn't one of these things. So you get this talky video in which I will talk about my dust collection system in this rather small shop, or let's call it cramped. I know there are smaller shops out there. That also means there's still a dragon out there. And I'm still working on the project that's meant to appease that dragon, the second project meant to appease it. Although I'm continually playing the clamp string, check out last video's project or last project's video, for that to also appease the dragon. You will see more about the dragon storyline. Good luck with that. And of course get more videos where the cultists are doing the talking. I can't wait! Let's begin with the dust collector. And I have two. That's because one of them was given to me by Meyer Maschinenhandel, I think 2 years back, to test out, and it's the record power one with the 3 motors, which at first I thought the third one would be kind of useless, because with all 3 running I think you get into territory that's low vacuum. It really sucks. And most of the hoses I use would contract to a point where they disconnect from their machines, and I have never used it with all 3 motors on. But then, a little bit later I have to say, I realized that the idea is not to use all 3 motors, the idea is to use 1 or 2. At least that's the conclusion I came to. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I'd use 1 for devices that need a little suction, for example my random orbital sander, and I would use 2 for the table saw or the miter saw. The problem was, where I put this dust collection I couldn't easily reach it. It is underneath something, and it got tricky to see which, there are 3 buttons, 1 for each motor, which one was on and off, and sometimes that involved cramps in the shoulder and so on. So what I did, and I'll preface this, I don't recommend that you do this because it's fiddling with electronics and live voltage and maybe dead maker. I don't know whether I got lucky or whether I did it right. If you do something like this, ask someone who knows what they're doing, or do it at your own risk. Although you would also do it at your own risk if you ask someone who knows what they're doing. Anyway, what I did, I took 3 relays that can be switched with 5 to 12 volts and that then switch 220 volts, the mains power we have around here. And then I took an Arduino-like piece to program it to do what I wanted. And long story short, what I wanted is to have 3 buttons. I will shorten that to 2 at some point. 1 button turns on 1 motor, another turns on 2 motors, and the third one kills the whole system, turns it off basically. The reason why I want to reduce it to 2 buttons is to have 1 to turn it off and 1 to turn it on. Which, if you have 1 motor running and you press the 1 button again, it would turn to 2 motors. That's the general idea, and I'll tell you why that's important in a second. Another bit of intelligence that I picked out of my noggin and put it into that program, so I don't have to use it anymore, is that there's an additional caveat with this kind of dust collection. You are not supposed to keep 1 motor running for an extended period of time. So if you have motor 1 running for 20 hours and motor 3 for 0 hours, eventually you run into problems with wear and tear and such. So what I did was I programmed this little Arduino thing to basically count up the minutes that each motor is running. And I think it's every 5 minutes, or maybe I set it to every minute, it'll check the numbers for every motor and then switch to the appropriate amount of motors, 1 or 2, with the lowest runtime yet. I hope that makes sense, because I think it does. It'll even out the load between the 3 motors and hopefully give me a better sucking experience. That's the system I have. It's in that corner of the shop, and I can press 1 button or 2. Another reason why I want to reduce it to a single button is that I have had cases, not every time, but when I press the 2 motor button and 2 motors start up simultaneously, the breakers broke or triggered. Right now when I'm using it, I'll press button for one motor and then the button for a second, and I have no problems with that. So that's also something the Arduino could do instead of me having to do it. Now let's talk about the ducting I did in my shop. I will gesture now, and I hope I'll have time to edit this and add some kind of graphics here so you can get what I mean. I have a rectangular shop and there's my dust collection. And I have two lines that run the perimeter. There's, for example, the table saw, there's the miter saw, and here's my lathe. What I did at first was to design a system that would allow me to have 3D printed blast gates at every junction where I need them. I feel kinship to the dust collection setup. Why? It isn't ancient and amorphous. No, but it does look ancient. That it does. So I made a number of these. They're pretty neat and I like the colors. I have a few of them. As you can see here, the idea was to automate the whole system, which is a whole new kind of worms to open, and I tried to open it. I printed this little add-on to put a servo motor here. And here I have one outfitted with a servo, and it can open and close the blast gate. It works pretty well. Well enough that I went further and took a whole row of them and a dedicated board to control servos. And that worked. Kinda. Well, yes, it worked. Then I went ahead of myself, and you know these things on classy boats where you have a lever that you turn to a certain position, and a similar one down in engineering will mirror that movement and tell them to go full speed or lunch break or whatever. I wanted to make this for my dust collection, to have something to set to the machine I want, and then set the blast gates to the desired sequence to get the suction to where I need it. And then turn on the dust collection to the number of motors that this device wants or requires. I have since realized that that's a bad idea because it's a lot of design, time and material investments. I'm talking about the whole system right now. I would need to wire the whole shop with a lot of wire and make sure everything works. But I did make a prototype for this, and I happen to have a rotary switch laying around, a rather old design. But it worked to make me hopeful for a system that would work like this. But then I realized I would still have to move around the shop a lot to set it to the right thing, push a button and whatever. It took a while for me to realize that there are easier systems, simpler systems, like this. The white stuff here is 3D printed. That's a piece of PVC pipe, I think, that fits into this print. I could put one here. This is mainly the prototype. I did that to cut down on filament use, and also because I had a number of these to be ducting or connect the hoses together. And this is what this can do. I think it's a rather simple system, and it works. So now I have these two lines set up, and at the back there is the hose coming from the dust collector with this part, and I have three of these. One leads directly to the bandsaw, one leads to this side, and another to this side. So now when I need dust collection at some point, and frankly, I think I had 10 connection points or target points in my first design. I basically use it for the table saw, the miter saw, the bandsaw, and the lathe. So there's 4. And 2 are on the same line, which means there is a slight need for blast gates, which I can operate manually. So right now I have a system with 3 connections, and I use these manual ones that also allow for some flexibility. They don't need energy and make my dust collecting life in the shop very easy. But there is another chapter to this journey. Sorry to disappoint. On top of regulating the runtime of each motor, what I also can do with this board that I made is I used these connectors from my model railway days to connect the push buttons to the board. And these have a very interesting feature because you can take two and plug them together. That's not the interesting feature, but you can take another one and plug it in sideways, connecting it to the same connection, basically. And I used that to add an additional set of wires, run it all around my shop to the lathe, and now by the lathe I have this. Two buttons, one starts the dust collection and the other one turns it off. That's also a reason why I want to reduce it to two buttons. But now, imagine my joy. There is joy involved here. Imagine my joy when I'm standing on the lathe, and when you're turning you don't have to use dust collection at every point. As it used to be, I'd have to walk from there to there, turn sanding on and walk back, and it adds up over time. And I wanted to reduce that, so now I can push a button, have dust collection, and push another button and turn it off. I'm also thinking of doing something like that near the table saw, just in this region of the shop, to be able to turn off dust collection if I put down the orbital sander, flip the board over and apply pencil marks and then turn it back on. It's the little things, and you might think that wouldn't add up, but I'm pretty certain that it will. What I'm mainly hoping with this video is to A, distract myself from the dragon. I'm still here. I know. How could I forget? But also to inspire you and maybe give you ideas for your own shop, for your own dust collection, which is important. So thank you for sticking with me through this rather convoluted piece of shop talk that I've been meaning to make for a while, because now I can take these apart, use the servos for something worthwhile, and send most of the blast gate parts to a recycling factory here in Germany that turns old PLA into new PLA. I'll put a link to them in the description. If anything in this video has inspired you, you know the drill. Comment inspired down in the comment section, or let me know what you're going to do in your shop to improve your dust collection and the air you breathe and all that. Thank you for watching. I'll be back next week with, I hope, another Dragon project. T2. And remember, I now have a Discord server where we can chat about all things making, role-playing, fantasy cooking and 3D printing. Maybe more. There's a link down in the description. Thanks for considering it, because you know you want it. And as always, remember to be inspired. This video sucked. I know. Wasn't it great?